if I had better posture, I wouldn't be able to fit in the frame of this camera. Or if let me change this a little bit so I'm not so hunched over. There we go. Hey there, everyone. Just putting the finishing touches on setting up the stream. Yeah. Like that. Yeah, that looks good. Angle it a little bit more so I'm more in frame. Boy, my lighting is terrible. I need to get one of those awesome streamer ring lights that I could put right up here. Because the lighting in my bedroom is just terrible. I'll turn the volume down on the music just a little bit. I feel like it's just a tad too loud. You guys can let me know if, my voice is audible over the music. Alright, I think we're just about ready to go here. Wow, yeah. My camera also sucks. I need a better camera. Previously when I streamed, I just had the camera pointed down at my iPad because my camera... Look at this. Why is the exposure so bad? It looks like I'm sunburned. Let me mess around with this a little bit. Did that and then that. That's a little bit better. Yeah. That looks a little less crazy. Still not great. Not great lighting, but at least it's better to help with the frame rate, it looked like, too. Alright. So welcome, guys. Welcome to the first Kaijune stream of 2026. If you're just joining us today, and you are not subscribed to my main channel, I'll give you a little bit of context for what it is that I'm working on today. Kaijune is a month-long drawing challenge. I created a prompt list, one prompt for every day of the month, and from those prompts I am going to design either a kaiju or a giant robot to as part of a greater story about kaijus attacking the whole world between the years of 1899 and 1920 and beyond, sort of an alternate timeline for Earth where a global threat facing all people on Earth instead of a world war is this threat of kaijus. And like I said, I'm doing them every day. I did start a little bit early, so this is actually not the first day's prompt. I've already uploaded day one's prompt, which was Shell, and I created this little creature here. Well, I guess he's quite large, actually. And day two, I won't even show you day two. I mean, you can kind of see it, but I won't show it to you yet. You'll see that tomorrow. But now I'm working on day three. I'm almost done with day three. Hopefully we can get through most of day four today also, because I'm almost done with day three. And day three, the prompt was equine. And if you don't know, it just basically means horse-like in nature. And I chose equine as a prompt because I couldn't really think of any horse kaijus. I'm sure one exists, but I'm not aware of any. So I thought it would be kind of a fun new take on giant monsters to do a giant horse kaiju. So that's what I'm going to be working on today. I'll probably wrap this one up within the hour or so, and then we're going to start on day four, the prompt for which was Estok, which is a type of sword. And so sit back, relax, enjoy. If you have any questions, comments, complaints, critiques, just let me know in the chat, and I'll be peeping the chat periodically to see what you guys are saying, and we can have some fun little conversations while I work. I always like to say when I'm streaming that I like having someone to talk to while I'm working, so to speak. I'm not really talking to you guys, more of in a metaphysical way. I'm talking to you, but nonetheless, I like having my mind occupied while I'm working on my illustrations, and in general too. I guess that's the ADHD brain. I like having multiple things going on at once. You are not late. We are just getting started. I mean, the stream has been going for a little while, but I haven't really done anything yet. I'm just kind of catching everybody up with what it is that I'm working on, and this particular illustration. Now, the cool thing about this Kaijune challenge is, like with every year, the prompt list is open to whomever would like to do it. But we're also holding a little competition on our Unveil community page, where we are offering a little bit of a reward to one side or the other in a little in-universe faction war between two different mindsets, two different socio-political philosophies in this universe of Kaijus. And the winner of the challenge will, or the winning team of the challenge will receive an illustration from me in the form of a desktop and phone wallpaper of a bunch of the illustrations done by you guys. So if you're an artist, an illustrator, a sculptor, a 3D modeler, a pixel artist, and you would like to participate, be sure to check out the link in the description of this stream. That will link to our Unveil community, and you can read a little bit more about the challenge and the lore and the story. And you don't have to participate in the challenge if you don't want to, but if you just want to make illustrations for the story of the Roiling Revelry, feel free to do so. But we've already got some great submissions on the Unveil community. Like I said, the first day's prompt was shell. And when I pick these prompts, these one-word prompts, when I come up with these one-word prompts, I try to keep them pretty vague. I would say S-Doc is probably the most specific prompt on my list. I chose it just because the word S-Doc has been bouncing around in my head of late. I think it was a boss in Final Fantasy XIV that I fought recently that used the word S-Stock, and I was like, that's a fun word. And it's an interesting prompt for a challenge like this, but it is very specific. But other than that, I try to keep them vague so that people can come up with a bunch of different ideas, and we've seen some cool crab designs, we've seen some cool turtle designs, we've seen some nautilus and prehistoric shelled cephalopod designs. I've seen a couple egg designs. So a lot of people are getting very creative with shell. Hopefully they keep it up throughout the rest of the month. Oh yeah, also happy Pride Month. I don't want to overshadow Pride Month with Kaijus. Although I feel like for a lot of people, the two things go hand in hand. Why must Pride Month and Kaijus be separate? But happy Pride Month, everybody. That's another good, partially another reason why I wanted to do equine as a prompt. I don't really draw horses that often. And I think horses, for a lot of people, are a challenging subject matter, for a lot of illustrators. I think it's just because, unless you really like horses as a subject matter for illustration, it's not something that people draw all that often. And they I think some people, they think about horses, and people are familiar with like dog anatomy and cat anatomy. Those are animals that we're used to seeing on a daily basis. But horses, again, unless you like work with horses or you own a horse, it's not something that a lot of people are familiar with, and their anatomy is a little confusing. It doesn't follow a lot of the same things as like cats or dogs. Their limbs are very very intricate and very different from a lot of other animals. Their musculature is very unique and defined. And they're one of those things too where it's like, it's hard to draw a horse and it's hard to draw a horse from memory, because even if you can't recall exactly, the different elements of a horse's anatomy or what makes a horse look like a horse, when you're done drawing it, if you draw it without a reference, you're like, this doesn't look like a horse. Like, people can tell, even if they can't tell you what a horse looks like, they can always say what a horse doesn't look like. It's one of those things where it's just like, I can't say why, but this isn't right. It's like, they're like feet in that way. Like human feet, I feel like kind of fall in that same category of illustration where it's like, I can't remember exactly what a foot looks like, but I know it's not this. This doesn't feel right. As opposed to like an alligator, where like for most people, like if you just draw like a big mouth and sharp teeth, they're like, oh yeah, that's an alligator. That looks right. That's enough of an alligator. There's a park nearby where I live, a big park, Roger Williams Park, and within that park there is a stable, a big property where they raise police horses. It's like I think the only place in at least the Providence area where there are like always horses. That's like the only place where it's like, if I wanted to go see a horse and I knew, I knew exactly if I needed to find a horse right now, that's where I would go. I would go to the Roger Williams Park and go to that stable with the police horses, a big field. And then I think, I'm sure if I went further out, north and west in Rhode Island, there are probably a lot of farms with horses and cows and chickens and stuff. Most of Rhode Island is pretty rural. Just not where I live. Actually, there are probably some horses in the town that I live in, honestly. But still, even if you see horses every day, it doesn't mean you can draw them. You see dogs every day, doesn't mean you can draw them either. I think it's easier to stylize a dog. It's easy, like if you just draw like that's enough to read as a dog. But it's a little bit harder to stylize a horse. First of all, no one ever draws a horse. Like if you wanted to read as a horse, you never draw it from the front. Like people will always draw a horse from the side. And then already it's not, Like, what the fuck is that? What is that? I think, yeah, it's just, it's a harder to draw like a simplified horse. I guess you need to give it like a muzzle. I think that shape works better. That's better. That's a better stylized horse. No, it's just it's a more. It just doesn't come as naturally as other illustration subjects. For most people, I know some people love drawing horses, and that's all they draw. Oh, make the top... Oh, you're right, though. Make the top of the face flat and the bottom lumpy. Yeah, that really is like that. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Horses have very thick necks, too. And then, like, the body, too, like... This reminds me of when I was in elementary school. We had to do it. So, when I was in elementary school, my art class was basically like... I don't know, it was very strange. It was so structured. I'm sure a lot of people, if you went to a public school in the United States... have similar experiences with art classes, whereas like our assignments were very standardized. They didn't actually let us really be creative. It was kind of just like learning really basic technical skills for drawing and illustration. So like all of our assignments were like we all had to replicate the exact same image. That was basically our art classes. And so like, the teacher would have a piece of artwork that she made, and then she's like, you all make this piece of artwork too. And one of the assignments we had was we had to draw 3 horses running, and she wanted us to draw the horses in a very specific way. Now, of course, when you tell a kid to draw something, young kids, they lack a lot of understanding of elements of illustration, but also just like an understanding of like how anatomy works. I was probably 7 or 8. I think this was when I was like in 4th grade. And so the way she told us to draw horses was they have a circle for the head, a circle for the nose, a neck connecting like this, and then a really long body like this. And then because they were running, the legs had to come out like this. And she said that you have to draw a circle for the knee, and then another circle for the ankle. And so like, it's honestly, it's not a terrible way to like break down how to illustrate a horse. And then like the mane was like, she wanted us to make the mane look like it was flowing behind to make it look like they were moving. But it was funny because we all had to draw the exact same thing. And they were all blue. I don't know why. Maybe there was like, maybe it was referencing some famous piece of artwork with like blue horses. Blue horses running. Painting. No, maybe not. If there was something famous, it would have come up. This is all... A lot of this looks like AI, honestly. Maybe this. Franz Marc. Anyway, so, everyone drew 3 horses like this, and then we painted, I think we used, like, watercolor. And it's just funny because me and my sisters, we all went to the same school. So at different points, we all did this illustration. My mom has 3 different copies of this same painting of 3 blue horses with these big, like, jointed knees, all running. And they, you know, they're like slightly different. It's very interesting seeing how different kids, all the same age, when given the exact same illustration assignment, all kind of do something slightly different. And it's fun, you know, now as adults, like, looking at it, be like, okay, which one is mine? Which one is Sophia's? Which one is Bella's? I think one of them is hanging up in my grandma's house, actually. But I tell you, that did not help me learn how to draw horses. I'm still, like, let me show you the reference image that I had for this. I found this, I don't even know if this is real. It's definitely photoshopped. Maybe this is a real horse. I do not think it's this big. This looks super fake. But I found this because I wanted a really, like, muscular, stocky, you know, powerful looking horse. But it's like, you know, this is the... as with everything, it's really helpful to have a good reference. And having a horse makes it that much better. And then I was also using this... Oh, this is really blurry. My sister lives in Denver. And outside the Denver airport, there's this sculpture of this giant blue horse. And it's terrifying. It is actually it's massive too. I don't know exactly how tall it is, but like it's well over 100 feet tall. It's huge. Now maybe it's not over 100 feet tall. It's about 100 feet. It's really big. And it's got glowing red eyes. I shit you not, they actually light up. And I don't... Apparently this sculpture, the guy who was making it, it fell on him while he was making it and killed him. So this horse has actually killed people. I remember my sister telling me that when I first time I visited her in Denver, we like drove past the horse, and she's like, "You see that giant blue horse? That's killed someone." And I was like, "What?" I thought she meant like it was a sculpture of like a horse, a real horse that was alive, and it like that horse had killed someone. But no, this sculpture killed the man who created it. Anyway, that was part of the inspiration, the colors. For this kaiju, because it's like giant horses. That's a giant horse. That is a giant horse that I have actually encountered. Quick rules question. Funding on spending Kaijune. Doing at least one high effort kaiju with a couple of forms and extra concept art. What's the best way to do that and not conflict with Rule 6? Oh, well, Rule 6 just means like, you know, you just do like equine, you do like day 3 equine like 17 times, you know, like if you just to spam it, just to like, I don't think anyone's gonna do that. Like, I don't think anyone wants to win the competition enough to just do the same thing over and over again. It would count as one submission. It would count like all of your concept art, all of the different forms and stuff, that would all just be one submission because it's one design. It's one design with several different forms, several different iterations. Yeah, that's not against the rules. But as far as like the competition goes, it would count as one submission. But it sounds like that's not really what you're interested in anyway. So there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely, I think that's cool. I think that's a cool idea to spend a lot of time and effort on a single piece throughout the month and really explore it and do a couple different pieces to accompany that one concept and design. Are they afraid of fallen people? That giant horse sculpture, it's outside the Denver airport, but I don't know if you can actually like get to it. It's like by the road. Denver horse sculpture. It's like, yeah, like you can't actually get to it. Look how fucking scary it is. Like it's terrifying. Like someone needs to make a creepypasta of this thing. It's got like these veins in it. It's really weird. Not that horse sculpture. Yeah, I don't think you can actually like get near it. Like there's no way to actually like approach it. Thank God, honestly, because it is incredibly cursed. I would not want to be near it. How big is it? Blue Mustang. Colloquially known as Blucifer. Blue Mustang's commissioned for $300,000. That would pay for the original proposal. Okay, let's see if this is real or not. Mustang, private collection, installation. Medical setbacks. Jimenez suffered multiple health complications, constant migraine, the last night, top of the fatal accident. Jimenez was killed in 2006 at age 65 in a studio when one of the sculpture's 3 sections came loose from a hoist, pinning him against the steel support beams, severing an artery in his leg. He bled to death on his studio floor before being dead on arrival. So that's true. He was actually killed by this sculpture. That's crazy. Okay, it's 32 feet tall. It's not 100 feet tall. It seems really big when you drive past it. And again, like I don't think you can actually stand next to it. But yeah, like you can see it from like, look how big it is. Like it looks like a kaiju. It's crazy. Lucifer. Yeah, when my sister told me that, I was like, this is my first time actually verifying it. But she told me that, and I was like, that sounds crazy. The statue killed him? But it did. Absolutely cursed. But yeah, that was a lot of the inspiration for this design. The Blucifer. If you ever go to Denver, it's like the first thing that you see. If you fly into Denver, that'll be like the first thing you see is the giant evil horse with red eyes. Lucifer. Is the most popular horse movie of all time Spirit? No. Can't be. No. Not even. Because there's like Black Beauty and like War Horse. War Horse is definitely more of like a popular movie. I'd say maybe with our generation, Spirit is the most popular horse movie. But even still, I mean, there are a lot of... I'm not really a horse girl. I don't know from horses and horse-related media. I remember my friend had a themed party about a year or so ago, and it was like horse girl themed, and we watched like a bunch of like really shitty horse girl movies. I'm not saying that horse girl movies are inherently bad, but the ones we watched were bad. And it was like a series of movies. It was called like... Oh, what was it called? Sky... And when I say horse girl movies, I don't mean like My Little Pony or like Barbie Unicorn Adventure. Like I mean literally just like a girl befriends a horse and rides on a horse. And what was it called? I can't remember. People who know horse movies, name off like movies recently, you know, from like the past like 2 decades or so. Because it was like, it wasn't an old movie series. It was a relatively new movie series. Racing Stripes. I don't know if Racing Stripes is an incredibly popular movie. My wife Claire likes that movie. Well, she doesn't like it, but she watched it when she was a kid. I say she likes it because I don't know anyone else who has ever even like seen it. Like even people my age, like Racing Stripes was like not a huge phenomenon, not a huge cultural phenomenon. I've never seen it. I remember Racing Stripes for me was like one of those movies where it's like I only ever saw it on like the coming attractions at the beginning of a VHS tape for a movie that I was watching. You know, I put on like, I don't know, Bridge to Terabithia or something, and Racing Stripes. Oh, you know what? Racing Stripes was probably on the VHS tape that I had for like Air Bud. I feel like that's like the same, although Air Bud I think predates Racing Stripe. But that's like the same genre. Oh, Seabiscuit. Yeah, Seabiscuit. That's true. My grandpa loves Seabiscuit. Yeah, Warhorse makes sense. I think I watched Warhorse because my sister, when it came out, my sister was really into Tom Hiddleston. And I don't know if there are multiple Warhorse movies, but the 2011 one, I'm pretty sure Tom Hiddleston was in that. And so she wanted to watch it because I'm pretty sure that's right. Someone check that for me, but I'm pretty sure Tom Hiddleston was in it. I'm pretty sure that's why we watched it. I don't know why else we would have watched it. Because I was like 2011, so I was like 15. Yeah, they're about 14 or 15. And I was not interested in movies like Warhorse when I was 15 years old. So something, speaking of donkeys and horses and zebras and temperament, I was watching a documentary recently about migratory animals, and they had a whole bit on zebras. And I didn't know this about zebras, but male zebras actually like care for their young. It's kind of an uncommon thing in a lot of species, for especially a lot of mammals, for males to care for the young. But male zebras, they kind of have like a harem of females that they breed with in their herd, and they defend the females and the offspring from predators, to the best of their ability. And zebras, as well as domesticated horses, and male zebras have this tooth. So this is like the jaw on the chest of this kaiju was inspired by this. They have these like incisor teeth way back in their mouths, and they're really sharp, and they have strong jaws, and they bite not just predators but each other when they fight for mates. They bite with these incisors, and horses, domesticated horses, have that too, though not all horses have them. It's kind of, for domesticated horses, kind of a vestigial trait, because they don't really have predators, they don't really compete for mates. So not all of them have it, but in zebras they still use it. I guess as like a sort of a remnant of a more primal time in horse history, and it's pretty crazy. I mean, that like, it's like that fallacy of like, herbivorous herd animals like aren't dangerous. They're not aggressive. They're not violent. But like, I wouldn't want to fuck with a fully grown zebra. Yeah, I guess actually, I'm just reading someone else say that defining horse media of their generation was My Little Pony, and yeah, I mean that makes sense. I kind of forget that they're horses. Honestly, again, it kind of goes back to like stylizing horses. Like they barely look like horses, but I guess they're ponies. I really love. If anyone here is into Magic the Gathering, if you lose up like horse Magic the Gathering, like this. Okay, well this is Shadowfax. This is from the Lord of the Rings set, but like, look how awesome this is. Like, I love like really indulgent, like fantastical horse art. That's like, it's not like this could be real. Like, it's stylized and it's exaggerated, but like, it's not a unicorn, it's not a Pegasus, it's just a really pretty horse. And I don't know, the kind of awesome this is. That's actually a really cool illustration. I'm not familiar with this card. But like, yeah, look how awesome that is. Like, it's just like this kind of abstracted, kind of horrifying horse. That's a little bit more fantastical. Crested Sunmare. I have the alt art for this card, where it's like Lisa Frank. Yeah, Bill! Love this card. I love Bill the Pony. I mean, this is a great illustration of Bill the Pony. The Lord of the Rings Magic the Gathering set had some of the best visual interpretations of, the written Lord of the Rings. I think of anything. And this Build a Pony is so good. I love this so much. Good card, too. Well, it's a good card in certain decks. It's not really a good card, but it's good for... I have a Sam Gamgee Commander deck, and this card is really good in that deck. I have Crested Sunmare in that deck too. That card is not... Look how awesome this is! Like, isn't it? This is just a horse, like creature horse, and it's just fighting a dragon. Like, how awesome is that? I just love that. I love when like horses, like without any added thing, you know, like they don't have to have wings or scales or anything. Like, just horses are just like something about them feels magical to humans. Like, you can make a fantastical beast that's just a horse. And this is like an armored horse. Like, that leans more into the fantasy side. This is just like giant green horse. That's pretty cool. Oh, this is from the racing set. Yeah, I mean, look how awesome this is. That's actually... I might be able to run this in my Sam Gamgee deck, honestly. That's not bad. It's not, like, good, but it's definitely not bad, especially since if I'm running Crested Sunmare, and I want to gain life anyway. I have a lot of life gain procs. That's awesome. That is awesome. Remove one of your attacking creatures from combat. Treat this as if the creature never attacked, except that defenders assigned to block it cannot choose to block another creature. God, old Magic the Gathering wording is fucking... It's like another language. That is crazy. That doesn't make... I would have to really... That is a crazily worded effect. So basically what that card does is it makes it so that your opponent will choose to block it, but then you can take the horse out of... You can take another creature out of combat, and then... But mid-combat, so the opponent can't use their creature to block another creature because it's already blocking the creature that got whisked away on a horse. I guess is the flavor of that. Wild. It's a wild stallion. Yeah, unfortunately a horse tribal deck might suck, but it would still be pretty cool. That is a horse worthy of a king. It really is. I don't know, I had this bias towards horses when I was a kid. Like, I didn't think they were cool. You know, because like my standard for like cool animals were like, it's like dinosaurs and dragons. Like, horses seemed uncool in comparison. But I don't know, horses are pretty cool. I think the evolution of horses and the evolution of humans' relationships with horses is very interesting. You know, the sort of process of domesticating horses from like a time, you know, after a time when we like hunted horses. Like, that's the other interesting thing, is like, you know, at a certain point in human history, and even to this day, I think some humans still do eat horses. You know, like wild horses. You know, they were a prey item. And then, I don't know, I guess at some point we were like, okay, well, these things are really hard to catch. Maybe we can use that. Yeah, compared to wild animals, a lot of domesticated animals are just so counterintuitive to actual like survival, you know, evolutionary adaptations because they're not designed. There's no the selective breeding process is not natural. It is not survival of the fittest. It's not whichever animal has the genes that allows it to survive and pass on its next trait. It's humans deciding like we want this trait in an animal for our purposes. So we breed them to have traits that might not actually be good. Might not actually be helpful in any context other than being domesticated by humans. I mean, think about like pugs. Pugs are like the opposite of good evolutionary adaptations. Like we literally designed pugs to have like to max into the poor health skill tree. All evolutionary points in going to die from respiratory problems. I remember the first time I actually saw a horse in person. I was very young, and one of my friends from school, had a horse, and we went to go ride him. We went to like the stable, and I was terrified. I had seen horses before. I had seen horses from like a distance, but I'd never been like up close next to one. And I just remember being like, these things are fucking huge. Now, granted, I was small. I was a youngin, so it seemed a lot bigger. But still, like horses are big, and they're a little scary. Like the first time you see an animal that size and you stand next to it. There's actually a photo of me from that day, standing awkwardly and very uncomfortably next to my friend and her horse. And you can just tell that I'm like very uneasy. Recently, a couple years ago, my one of my cousins got married out in Delaware, and they got married on this big farm. Beautiful location. It was a beautiful wedding. And the farm had horses, and so like after the ceremony, we were just walking around. The weather was gorgeous, and there was this horse, in his paddock or whatever you call it, and he was kind of trotting around. But he came over to us, me and the rest of my cousins. We were just walking over to him, and he was so friendly. He was such a chill horse. We were like picking little flowers and giving them to him, and we put one like behind his ear. And he was just so chill with it. We were like petting his nose, He was just a good boy. We didn't know what his actual name was, but we named him Buttercup because we giving him these little yellow flowers. And he was super chill. And like so that was like the opposite. I mean, the other horse that I met, didn't do anything to me. It was just scary. But like that's like my most recent interaction with a horse. And I was like, oh, this horse was kind of awesome. This horse kind of rocked. Big fan of that horse. I don't know why I'm drifting so far away from my desk here. Posture check. Excuse me. The other interesting thing about horses, at least in Western culture, is they kind of went from this necessity, this tool, this vehicle, that was sort of essential for travel and for transportation and for work and labor, to like a status symbol where it's like, oh, I can afford a horse. I don't really use it for anything. I go on nice rides around I mean, it's kind of, like a car, like a car is a necessity, but it can also be like a luxury status symbol where it's like, well, I don't really need a car that, has seat warmers and, has ChatGPT built into the dashboard, or that can park for me. But I like to say that I have that. It makes me feel awesome and successful. And horses are kind of the same thing, where it's sort of like, you don't really need a horse to function in modern society, but they still carry that significance of like this kind of, expensive, powerful, and a little dangerous. I think people, historically like it when their horses are a little dangerous, a little temperamental, a little frightening, makes them feel tougher. If you're riding on the back of a big, scary animal, any masculinity issues you might have, well, they don't go away, but they're suppressed for the time being because you're on a big-ass fucking horse. It's also funny that that horses, again, at least in Western culture, have sort of been, they again, this is not something I necessarily agree with. I just find it is what it is, that horses are like a girl thing. Like, you grow up as a boy, you like trucks and dinosaurs. Grow up as a girl, you like horses and ballerinas. That's like sort of the gender binary, at least, in the United States, of like marketing and stuff. Like My Little Pony is for girls, and Barbie Unicorn Adventure is for girls, and, Gallop Racer 2000, that's marketed towards girls. But like, I don't know why. I don't know what the shift in that was, because I think for a long time horses were a very masculine thing. Like the idea of a man riding on a big muscular horse, and every time there's a sculpture of a horse somewhere in like a park or outside of a museum or something, it's always got like huge balls. Like they never censor that's, first of all, it's never a girl horse, and it's never, they never censor the dick and balls of these horses. They always want them to have huge balls just out, and it seems so intentional. It's like that's part of it. This is a big successful man riding on his big masculine horse with his dick and balls out, and I feel like that's very intentional. But for whatever reason, in the past couple of decades, like horses are for girls. Like that's like that's a girl thing. It's marketed towards girls. Again, obviously, everyone can love horses. I just find it interesting that, in TV and in toys and in clothing and stuff, like horse stuff is marketed for girls. Tends to be marketed for girls. Can horses kill a grown man? Oh yeah, absolutely. A horse could kill you in one swift movement. If you get kicked in the head by a horse, if you don't die, that's surprising, honestly. Like if a fully grown horse kicks you with full strength in the head, you're probably gonna die. That one kick. And if he really wanted to kill you, he would then continue to stamp on you until you died. Like, horses are dangerous. And they can also bite you. Like I was saying, like they have those incisors. A lot of male horses have those incisors for biting. And even if they don't get you with the incisors, like horse jaws are powerful and they could really hurt you. I think a horse would have to really want to kill you to bite you to death. I don't think there are a lot of cases of like a horse like mauling someone with their teeth. That's not really their like go-to. I think a horse would be more likely to bite you and then like try to get rid of you and try to run away, because obviously they don't want to eat you. Although horses are not exclusively vegetarians. I've seen videos from like people's like farms where a horse will pick up and eat like a baby chick, like a little chicken baby. They have an instinct to get like protein and minerals from small animals, and a lot of herbivorous animals will do that, like deer and stuff too. Like if they find like a small animal that's easy for them to just like snorkel up, they will. Kind of similarly to how like wolves will sometimes eat berries and even grass. Sometimes a horse will be like, I need that protein fix, bro. What's that, a little baby chicken? I'll eat that. Scarf that down. I mean, look at this horse. This horse eats people. Like, this horse he's getting his protein fix. Although I brought this up after talking about horses, but a horse would never try to eat an adult living person. I mean, maybe if a horse found a dead person, maybe it would try to eat parts of it, but probably not. Like, they're not really designed for, like, crunching bones, unless they're very small bones. The bones of, like, a little baby chick. They can eat that. Scariest herbivorous animal's got to be a hippo, which also will seek out and eat meat from time to time. Usually dead things. I'm not sure if there's ever been a documented case of like a hippo trying to hunt something, but they definitely try to kill things. They definitely will go after and kill pretty much anything that they see as a threat to their territory. Or just if they're pissed, like they might just like they're just kind of temperamental animals. Usually animals that live in very extreme climates. They're just like it's in their nature to be competitive and territorial and aggressive. And hippos are like, I would honestly rather be trapped in a room with a hungry lion than an angry hippo. Because at least a hungry lion is going to try to kill me as quickly as possible. An angry hippo is going to fucking maul me to death, and it's not going to be quick. Yeah, I mean, if you shared your habitat with giant crocodiles, you couldn't afford to be good-natured. You can't just be like, "Excuse me, please don't try to eat me." Have you ever seen like lions trying to kill a hippo? Sometimes in the dry season and stuff, when hippos and lions are, they cross paths more often than normal, and the lions are desperate. Like they will. I've never seen a pride of hunting lions actually successfully kill a hippo, but I've seen them try, and it's crazy because they like jump on its back and they like they try to bite into it, but there's their skin is so tough. And they're so strong, you know, there's no real way of dispatching them, you know, with the kit that a lion has. Usually it ends up with the lions getting their ass beat. Also, hippos are gross. You know, they mark their territory with poop. And their, like, territorial displays usually involve, like, spraying poop everywhere. Which is just disgusting. You know, spraying a little bit of pee here and there, you know, alright, sure. Whatever. But, like, spraying poop is just... I get it, you know, it's like... It's just how it is in the world of hippos, but they're not winning any points in my book for that particular behavior, for that quirk. Hippo sweat is pink. Looks like blood. It's crazy, but it helps block UV radiation. It's like built-in sunscreen. It's kind of cool. I mean, I'm not saying hippos aren't cool. Hippos are definitely very interesting animals. You know, like so many African animals, it's like this remnant of a more prehistoric Earth. You know, with these animals that are so massive and so well adapted to live in very extreme conditions. And there are so few animals like that on Earth. Yeah, Amazon river dolphins are pretty scary. I know that they're not like inherently aggressive, but they have been known to attack people, and just visually they look very scary. I think part of what makes them so scary is that they live in very murky, fresh water. So like a lot of photos of Amazon river dolphins like have them, you know, kind of obscured by silt and algae and clouds of dust and dirt and stuff. So like when you look up Amazon river dolphin, you're gonna find like creepy photos. That's a nice illustration. Okay, actually most of these photos are of them above water. And they're still a little creepy looking. I guess the other thing that's uncanny about them is that it's almost like a human flesh tone. You know, it's like a color that a human could be. Yeah, that's a cute illustration. Makes them look a little friendlier. Although it's on Facebook, so that could have been AI generated. Yeah, this is kind of what I was thinking of. I've seen a lot of pictures like this. And this definitely makes them look creepier. That's pretty scary. I'll give you that. That's pretty weird looking. That one's cute. Look, he's got a little leaf. Look at those teeth, though. I don't mess with those teeth. The pacu are very interesting. You know, they're related to piranhas, but they're mostly herbivorous. And they have these teeth that are designed for eating nuts. nuts and fruits. So, when the rainforest floods during the wet season, in the Amazon in South America, the water level reaches the trees, and a lot of these trees have evolved to spread their seeds through the water. In a lot of places, seeds are spread by birds, animals that can pick up the seeds, eat the fruits, eat the seeds, and then disperse them in their droppings through the air. But in some certain places in South America and in the Amazon, these trees reproduce and they spread their seeds through fish, because the fruits fall into the water. So the pacu have these teeth, this dentition, designed for crunching, very tough, like Brazil nuts and stuff. And but of course, when it comes to really powerful jaws, they're powerful no matter what you're using to bite. It's like gorillas eat almost exclusively plants, but they have incredibly powerful jaws, some of the strongest jaws in the animal kingdom. And if you got bit by a gorilla, turns out it hurts. Not a lot of people know that. Getting bitten by a gorilla doesn't feel good. I don't know for sure. I've never been bitten by a gorilla. I don't know a lot of people who have been bitten by a gorilla. I'm taking an educated guess that it would hurt. Who knows, though? Maybe it would feel good. It's one of those things. It's like, don't knock it till you try it. I don't know. Like, maybe being bitten by a gorilla is secretly awesome. Maybe it's like the government has an anti-gorilla bite propaganda. They've been trying to turn us against gorillas since King Kong. And really what they don't want us to know is that being bit by a gorilla is actually incredibly fulfilling and will change your life in all sorts of positive ways. I actually just watched that episode of River Monsters. I recently found out that River Monsters is on Tubi, because I think the only other streaming service it's on is the Discovery Channel streaming service, and I'm not paying for that shit. But Tubi is free, and all the seasons of River Monsters are on there. So I was like, oh, I haven't rewatched River Monsters in a long time. I'll boot that up. I love River Monsters. I think that's why... Oh, I also watched a documentary about the Amazon recently. But yeah, pacu are like fresh in my mind. When I was a kid, I first learned about pacu. They had a couple pacu in my local aquarium. They had this big, like, Amazon tank. It was kind of creepy. I didn't really love it. One of those tanks with, like, kind of like, the water was kind of hard to see because it was kind of dark. There's all kinds of plants and stuff in the water. And there was some ugly looking fish in that tank. They also had arowana, though. I liked the arowana. They were pretty. But yeah, the pacu were kind of freaky. They have their teeth are very human-like. They kind of look like human teeth. So they're a little freaky. Yeah, I've heard that explanation for why River Monsters was canceled. I don't know if that's true. Like, I've never validated that story. It's kind of apocryphal, but it is. I like it. I like saying that, whether or not it's true. He just ran out of fish to catch. He did have another series though. In I think it was 2019. I found this on Tubi. After I finished all of River Monsters, there was another show, and it was called Jeremy Wade's Dark Waters. And I really liked it. It was a little less sensational than River Monsters. It didn't quite have that, like, 2010s Discovery Channel, like, oh, there's blood on the screen and, River Monsters. Like, crazy shit is happening. How a lot of nature documentaries tried to like kind of over dramatize the stuff that they were showing on screen. Not that it isn't crazy, some of the stuff they show, but like is a little sensationalist for the sake of getting more views. But Dark Waters was kind of felt more like a documentary series. It was he caught fish, he went around catching fish and stuff, but it was also a lot more straightforward, a lot more direct about environmental issues affecting wildlife populations, and specifically ocean and freshwater ecosystems. He had an episode about sturgeon, and like the formula for the episodes were kind of similar, where it started off where he's investigating some myth, some local legend about some animal, some creature that is like killing people or is causing some sort of distress in a local population of humans, and so he goes to investigate it. And he had this one episode about some strange monster in the waters of Ireland. Is it Ireland? That doesn't sound right. I think it was Italy. And it ended up being about sturgeon. And I didn't even know there were sturgeon in Italy, and there aren't a lot left. They were overfished. And now there is an invasive species of... what was it that was eating... I can't remember what species was eating the sturgeon, but now there's a... I think it was Wells catfish. I think Wells catfish had gotten into the waters where the sturgeon lived. And they were just, voracious, and they eat everything, and they grow gigantic. And it was just interesting. He talked a little bit more candidly about the impact that humans specifically have on fish and wildlife in general. So when it comes to, and now I'm going to switch topics back to the actual thing that I'm illustrating right now, just because I'm just about done with this illustration. When it comes to these month-long drawing challenges, something that's a little difficult is figuring out when to stop, when to be done with a piece, because you do one every day at least, and that's a lot of work, and it can be difficult to get to a point where you're like, I'm happy with this, I'm done with it, without spending more time on it than would be helpful, conducive to completing a challenge like this, because you want it to look good, you want to be happy with it, but sometimes you spend too much time on it. And you're like, now how am I going to do the next day or the day after that? And so part of what I'm really trying to figure out this month for my own sake is what techniques that I can use, my own techniques that I can use to work a little bit more quickly and but still be happy with my final product. I think I often overwork illustrations for a number of reasons. But part of it is that I think my approach it varies too often from piece to piece. I don't think you always have to illustrate in the exact same way every time you illustrate anything. It's good to have a little variety to your illustration skills, but sometimes in like a professional setting, or for a challenge like this, it is really important to have a sort of set technique that you always return to, because it helps you work more quickly, more efficiently. I hate to say that, because I don't think that art should be something that you have to consider in the same way that you might consider like an accounting job or like, fixing a car. It should be something that you can take your time with, that you can really slow down and explore the process of. But if you want to get into art and illustration professionally, in any capacity, you do need to be able to work within time limits, time constraints, because that's just the world we live in. Hopefully that will change in the future, but it's definitely not changing anytime soon. So if you do want to be an illustrator, a professional illustrator, you do need to learn how to work, efficiently, how to use your time effectively and efficiently. And part of that for me is just saying like, this is good, this is done. And I'm saying that because I'm looking at this and I'm thinking of a bunch of things that I would want to change and add, but really what I should have done is thought about that before I got to this stage in the illustration, because it's so much harder to make changes when you're this far into an illustration to add things on without it looking rushed and incomplete. So I think I am done with this. That is what I'm going to call it. I'm going to call it done. And at the very least, I'm not going to touch it anymore right now. Maybe I come back, 2 hours, 3 hours tomorrow, and I say, oh, this one little thing I want to change or add. But for now, I'm just going to say it's done. I'm happy with it. I like the lighting. I like the musculature. I think this is my favorite part right here. And all things considered, I finished this fairly quickly. I started this the other night. I worked on it for probably 2 or 3 hours, and then I worked on it today. Worked on it a little bit yesterday, too, for about an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then I worked on it today for, I don't know, how long have we been here? An hour, a little bit less than an hour. And all told, that's still too long. I need to be a little bit quicker. So we're going to move on to my next illustration. So there's day 3. Now we're moving on to day 4. Now, you don't have to, if you're following along with this challenge, you don't have to do multiple illustrations a day. I always like to do multiple illustrations a day. Well, one, because I have the time. I set aside a lot of time this month to work on this. And two, with these month-long challenges, I found that you can't control your schedule 100% for an entire month. Things are going to come up. Things are going to change. You're going to have plans. You're going to have places you need to go, places you need to travel to. And you're not going to have as much time as you think you will. So it's always a good idea to get a little bit of a backlog going, so to speak. And that's why I like to do multiple illustrations per day if I can. Because that way, if one day I can't do any illustrations, I still have them done and I don't fall behind. 7 by 9 is how big I'm making these. So let's move on to our next one. And you guys can sort of see the process from the ground up. I'm also going to take a drink of water. What brush am I using for this right now? So for painting, I'm using the textured buildable blender brush from our shimmer pack. I also use the blunt pencil for sketching and sometimes for line art. I also actually sometimes use the textured old school shader from the Poketo pack for painting. And then also from the Poketo texture pack, I sometimes like to use the wet sputter texture, depending on what I'm painting, or the graphite sketcher. I also like using, from the field journal pack, I like the weathered field pencil sometimes for lines, and the ratty layering brush for colors as well, also the sooty texturizer. My go-to, though, is definitely the shimmer pack, the textured buildable blender, and the blunt pencil. I found that when it comes to brushes, you really have to find ones that work for you. It's worth experimenting. I used to not like to experiment with different kinds of brushes digitally, or traditionally for that matter. Excuse me. But I think trying new brushes and getting a feel for what you like with your brushes is very important. So the next prompt, day 4's prompt, which is what I'm on right now, is S-Stock. which is a type of sword. It's a type of thrusting sword, if memory serves. They're usually very narrow, very pointy. That's a good example of an S-stock. You know, they're not swords for... Oh yeah, Dark Souls is an S-stock. They're not really swords for, like, slashing and crushing. They're more for, like, stabbing. They're kind of like rapiers, you know, in terms of how you use them. But they're a little heavier. Then I chose this prompt because I just like the word. It's just a cool sounding word. And I have a vague idea. So I kind of want to do another mech. So far I've done 2 Kaijus and 1 mech. I kind of want to do another mech, or an automaton, because they're not actually piloted. They operate on their own. And I'm kind of thinking about how... I'm kind of thinking about Final Fantasy and how robots and automatons look in that world. And how they have a lot of, like, organic shapes. But then, like, mechanical, you know, bodies, mechanical innards. And I like that. And I was thinking about this visual that I have in my head of this kind of hunched looking machine that's got these arms with these long, almost spear-like attachments to them. You know, I could kind of dress them up to make them look more like swords, but like... It's kind of like the contrast between the very fluid, rounded top that almost looks, you know, again, like serpentine. When it comes to, like, machines, I usually don't like drawing machinery. It's not my comfort zone. But I've found what really helps is to just plan out, you know, this is how I do it. I think maybe other illustrators might have different techniques. So, you know, always learn from multiple different illustrators. But what I like to do is kind of plan out the body shape, you know, and then just sort of fill in the missing pieces with, like, a bunch of, like, miscellaneous gear and stuff. And I'm not even using any reference yet at this point. I'm just kind of creating some shapes. And then when I employ, at the stage at which I employ some reference, is when I go in and I kind of fill in. It's always good to flip your canvas back and forth too. But when I go in to sort of add in all the little details and nitty-gritty, so to speak, that's when it's nice to have some more specific reference. Have some cool Art Deco shapes in here, so I have this sort of Art Deco theming. And get some references for that too, but I want to put like some sort of big, elaborate looking emblem on the face of this. Another thing I like to do at this stage in the sketching process, this is something you can do as a digital illustrator. It's a little harder to do if you're not working digitally, but you know, you can use the distort transform tool to sort of exaggerate your shapes a little bit more. You know, if your original sketch isn't quite what you were hoping for. Although that's not really it either. I want it to be a little longer. Yeah, I like it coming out. I think what I'll do is I'll just have it come up a little bit more. And then have it come back a little bit more like this. That's not it. It's not quite it. Let's redraw this bit. When I draw mechs, I BS all of it. I am not... Like, I think it's really cool when illustrators... You know, obviously, like, I think any good mech design is going to be, like, implausible. You know, it wouldn't actually function. But I do think it's really cool when artists try to make it look like it can function. For me, like I said, I kind of like leaning more into, like, the Final Fantasy mech and automaton design philosophy of it looking almost alive, and less like a machine per se, somewhere in between being a machine and being a living thing, and just like in general not really sweating the details, so to speak, not really focusing in on making it look plausible. But I do think it's really cool. Like, yeah, for me, like, and in this story, you know, the idea of a machine is less about, you know, how it will function and more about what it represents. You know, something artificial, something manufactured, something man-made, something emotionless, something unopinionated. And for those purposes, it doesn't really need to be technically correct. In fact, I kind of like that it's not, because it makes it feel even more uncanny. But again, that's me. A lot of artists do really put the time into making it look believable and as plausible as possible. And I think that's really cool. For me, I like to reference machinery and just kind of like throw bits and bobs that speak to me visually into what I'm illustrating. So like that's like the basic body plan that I want. It's the basic silhouette. And now what I'm going to do is, because I want this to be, you know, it's set in the early 20th century, what I've been looking up is like industrial era machinery, and finding like really primitive looking machinery, stuff that, you know, would work, you know, like, that's not a great image though. God, look at that. How crazy is that? How many kids died doing shit like that? Yeah, that's good. Like, I don't even know what this is. A press, maybe? But, like, all of those, like, shapes and this big gear, this spool that has what looks like a chain on it. You know, there's a lot you can use there. You know, again, I'm not looking for things that would make sense. I'm just looking for, like, shapes and just general vibes, if you will, that I could use to kind of fill in the gaps. Victorian machinery. That's interesting. That's good. Kind of a low resolution image. Ah, it's Pinterest. Okay, it's a low resolution image on Pinterest too. Okay, get out of there. Get out of there. I don't want you right now, Pinterest. You annoy me. You have too many ads. That's good. Some nice colors too. That's the other thing I'm looking for. Now I'm also going to grab some not real world reference. Magitech. So again, like Final Fantasy, you know, like these machineries, it reads as machinery, but it doesn't quite look plausible. That's good. I like that. And then also, I'll look at BioShock Infinite. Some of the I love this horse. I love how opulent it is. I have this. Look him. Songbird. This isn't a very helpful reference, though. They kind of simplified it a little bit. Actually, I don't think Songbird is going to have what I'm looking for. It doesn't have enough exposed machinery. What about,
I'll put you back.
what about, Dishonored? There's always some cool machinery in that game. This game has some of the best concept art. It's game series, I guess. Very distinct visual identity. Yeah, what were those things called? Yeah, that's good. Now we're talking. Now we are talking. Let's find some large images. Yeah, that's good. That is good. And like, yeah, this is another example of like, it's not like it. You know, each one of these little bits and bobs, you know, are well referenced and you know, clearly distinguishable, but it doesn't really make sense. Like, why would this be asymmetrical on one side if both arms do the same thing? But it looks cool, you know? Ooh, that looks cool. I like that. I don't remember that. That's kind of cool, too. Alright, I think that's enough reference, honestly. So let's go in here. My big horse. Let's shrink this down. Like that. Alright, and let's do a little bit more with this silhouette. So one of the things that I've found for these kinds of challenges that not only saves me time, but I also think helps me be more satisfied with the final product is... oh, I also wanted to get some Art Deco inspiration. That's alright. Can improv this for now. Is working a lot more gesturally and cleaning it up a lot less. I think a lot of the times me personally, this is not true for everyone, but me personally, I tend to make things a little too neat, too legible. I have a lot of, I worry a lot about having my work, my illustrations make sense to people. I'm very used to like being challenged, like, what is that? That doesn't make sense. Why would you add that? Shouldn't you do this instead? And for a long time I just sort of let those criticisms affect me. You know, I sort of listen to people and be like, yeah, no, I should have made this look like this instead. Like, this makes more sense. This would have been better. And it's very liberating when I don't listen to those kinds of criticisms. You know, some criticisms it's important to hear. It's important to hear and respond to and make changes in your work because of them. But some critiques you hear, and they don't, you have to consider them. You have to think about them, and come to your own conclusions about them. But some criticisms just are wrong for you. They're just like, no, I what I want to create does not align with your personal tastes, person criticizing this thing. And I don't want to create that. I want to create something else. I want to create something that's weird or maybe confusing or a little abnormal, or a little ridiculous, regardless of your opinions. And it's much easier to do that if your actual process is a little more chaotic. A little more haphazard. And a little less calculated. A little less meticulous. And that's most recent question in the chat is, any tips for drawing faster? I would say that's one of my tips. Be a little bit more gestural. Something else that I've been doing is, instead of doing an illustration, doing line art, so this is my sketch phase, if we want to call it that. Instead of doing line art and then coloring it, I start adding colors in my sketching phase. I think that's a good strategy in general. I think that will help a lot of people, not just with working faster, but also with having just in general a better final product. If you are considering color and light and all of these things earlier on in your process, the whole piece is going to feel more cohesive, a little more polished. Your decisions will apply to everything that you're making, not just if you separate color into one step and line work into another step. Actually, I'm thinking about it. And the story for this mech that I'm kind of creating in my head as I'm working on it, is this is one of the earlier automatons manufactured to fight the Goliaths. And so maybe it doesn't actually have an Art Deco look to it. It has more of a Victorian, elaborate, ornate, almost floral looking, Rococo visuals to it. It predates that Art Deco aesthetic. Sorry if you hear a dog in the background. It's not my dog. That's a neighbor's dog. My window is open right now. I don't know what he's barking at. Oh, another dog's joining in. But if you get really stuck in those details, you can waste a lot of time. The more I found, the more you're zoomed in, the more you are really honing in on these little details, the more time you waste. I'm not saying that you shouldn't work detailed, but the more details you use, the more time you're going to use. Details require a lot of time. So if you want to have a lot of details, you got to give yourself a lot of time. And for a challenge like this, you have to find a way to have fewer details. And like you can also imply details without having, without spending a lot of time rendering them. You know, you can use color and light in lieu of line. You understand what I'm saying? It's tempting to use line work to convey everything that you want to convey with your illustration. But sometimes, using line work is, it's just one of many possible options. And sometimes you can just use line work to plan things out. And then go back into it and add those details with color and light. And again, that will save you a lot of time in and of itself, because by doing that, you are sorry, I'm losing my train of thought as I'm illustrating. You're essentially killing two birds with one stone. Instead of finishing all the details with line work and then adding in colors separately, you're adding information both with line work and with light and colors. And you kind of do two steps in one. And that's something that a lot of professional concept artists do. They're on a very tight budget. They have to get as many different ideas out as possible. A very tight time budget, I should say. And so, to be able to illustrate using both light and color and shape and line works is very important. So again, these are automatons. They are not piloted. They are completely autonomous. They are robots that do not have pilots inside them. There is no room for a pilot inside any of these. And part of the reason it doesn't have like a window or something like that is because I want that to be conveyed, that it is an unmanned, completely autonomous drone. So I guess in that case it's not really a mech, because I think mechs in sci-fi are usually piloted. It's not piloted. It is a completely autonomous machine. So, you can see here that my lines are kind of blurry. They're scribbly. They're all over the place. They're not really clean or legible. And I'm not really going to clean them up too much. Not in my lining stage. My sketching stage and my quote-unquote lining stage are kind of going to be one and the same. Another thing with illustration is you have to be willing to just say, this needs to be changed. Like, if you get too focused on one element of the design, and you find yourself reworking it, and then moving on and then saying like, no, I still don't like. Sometimes it's worth it, and you'll save a lot of time just by going, no, I'm gonna like this is kind of bothering me here. I'm just gonna rip this top part of it off. I still haven't quite figured out what I want to do with the back of it. But I'm just gonna rip it off. I don't think I like that either. But sometimes instead of like tweaking and fine-tuning and doing the same thing over and over again and still not being satisfied with it, sometimes it's better to just say, nope, it's all gotta be redone. And again, like, when I say all gotta be redone, ideally you're doing this in your sketching phase while you're still early on in the process. Because if you're 2 hours deep into an illustration, and you can still make changes, versus like 20 hours deep into an illustration and you're just like, oh no, this is going nowhere. Like, it's a little too late at that point to start over. I mean, sometimes if you can, I've done that. Not maybe not 20 hours into it, but I've spent like a good 3 hours, 4 hours working on something, and then saying like, no, this isn't. I'm not happy with this, because like I know that feeling of like being done and looking at it and being like, I'm done and I'm not working on this anymore, but I still don't love it. Like, I'm still not happy with it. think I've just realized that adding a little antenna onto it actually would also help it look a little bit more like primitive technology and make it look more like a drone. Maybe controlled by someone else far away. You know, transmitting signals. Some of the colors that I really liked, I like in this sort of this bronze and this green. Maybe some of that red in there too. I really like the colors in this image in particular. I also like how this has these very, very ornate, very over embellished like pillars behind it. I don't know where this is right now. The stained glass in the window. I don't know if this is a museum and they just have this piece installed for display. But I love the setting of this image here. And I really like the colors in it. If the head could extend like a spear. I do kind of like the idea of just putting a sharp nose on it. That's kind of fun. I like those three sharp points at the front of the silhouette. Again, I don't know if that's very practical, but I like the idea of it just like, if all else fails, if its two arms aren't enough to subdue its target, it just sticks its face straight into it. So its face, so to speak. It's not really a face. The original War of the Worlds was actually not a book. It was a radio broadcast. I can't remember the name of the guy who did it, but it was a story that was broadcasted on national radio, and some people actually believed it was real, which is kind of this fun story that people like to tell a lot in relation to it. But regardless of that, it was not necessarily steampunk. It was from, I believe, the 50s. Maybe this, yeah, I believe it was in the 50s. So I don't know if the visuals described were explicitly steampunk per se, more of a retro-futuristic, what we would consider to be like retro-futuristic vision of alien technologies and stuff. I mean, the genre of steampunk as like a visual aesthetic hadn't really been defined at that point in human media. No one was using the term steampunk. I don't think that term came around until early 2000s, maybe late 90s. So, visuals like, gears and steam valves and exhausts and, industrial era technologies, were just referred to as, industrial era technology. Because, you know, steampunk and, you know, actual industrial era technology are two different things. Steampunk kind of takes actual machinery like this and adds a bit of fantasy to it. But, you know, technology like that did actually exist. And you can kind of use that to create... You know, this is pretty steampunk, what I'm creating here. But again, like, that's a genre that was defined fairly recently. H.G. Wells wrote the original novel in 1898, and Orson Welles did his audio drama in 1938. I see. So it was a book first. Oh, I didn't know that. I'm familiar with some illustrations done, you know, inspired by, I guess, the original book, that definitely aren't steampunk, but are very bizarre. Yeah. This is what I was thinking of. Enrique Alvim Carreras. So yeah, definitely not steampunk. Again, you know, the genre, the visual aesthetics of this era, I don't think had been really defined yet. They didn't have a genre to describe it at the time that they were being done. YouTube. But I don't know. I've never read the book. As you might tell, since I didn't know it even was a book first, I've never read it, so I don't know if they explicitly say like the aliens are powered by steam or have visible gears and stuff. I watched a couple months ago. I watched the War of the Worlds movie from like 2023, 2022. Can't remember exactly when it came out. but it was the one that was produced by Amazon. Um, that was like mostly filmed over a Zoom call, um, and it was just god awful. Like fun, bad, like bad enough that I enjoyed watching it, but it was just so bad. Um, really bad acting, really terrible story. There was also like a lot of really blatant, unapologetic, ads in it. Like a lot of like ads for Amazon that were really creepy, especially creepy considering like the general theme of the movie was like it's good that the government and big businesses are watching you because they can protect you, and the fact that Amazon paid to make that movie, and that was like the theme of the movie, is just a little too much like a bit in The Simpsons. Yes, yeah. Ice Cube was the main guy, the main actor, the main character. Yeah, it was really bad. I've heard that too. I heard that they actually used footage from like real plane crashes and actual wars. Um, yeah, it's a really strange. I honestly, it's worth watching just to understand like some modern issues with the film industry, like some kind of major concerns about how films are being paid for and produced by massive corporations, and how that can affect not just the quality of a film but the kinds of stories being told through film media. You could probably show that in a class about film theory, and have your students write a pretty long essay about the issues raised by that movie, by the production of that movie. Am I still playing Creatures of Scenario? No, I haven't played Creatures of Scenario in a while. That's so funny. I started playing that game as a joke about a year or so ago. My friend was away and he didn't have his computer with him. Excuse me, or rather, he had his computer with him, but it was like a work computer. He didn't have any games on it. So the only thing we were playing was Roblox. And we found this game, we were just perusing through all of the games on Roblox, and a lot of them were just kind of not fun at all. But then we found Creatures of Scenario, and we played it for a while, and he thought it was funny, and then he got bored. But then, like, I found the next day, I came back, and I was like, he wasn't even there. I was like, I'm just gonna play this. This was kind of fun. I liked the Creatures of Scenario, and so I kept playing it. And then, like, I would say for like a good year, I was playing that game, and it's bad. Like, it's a really bad, like, poorly balanced, unfun game to play. But I love those, like, I like those, like, games where you just be a monster and, like, fly around as a big monster, and you get to dress up your monster and decorate your monster. Like, that's just sort of my weakness as a gamer. Like, the game itself can suck, but I still enjoy it because I like being a monster. Sort of similarly, I played a game called Path of Titans, which is another PvP MMO, um, but you play as dinosaurs, and in kind of contrast to Creatures of Scenaria, they kind of go for this paleontological accuracy with their dinosaurs. Not in so much as they all would live. Dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals, marine reptiles, pterosaurs, even some like Pleistocene reptiles like megalania, like the large monitor lizard. But anyway, they visually the way the animals are depicted are as accurate to modern paleontology as they can. They even update them if new information was found about the animals, which I thought was cool. And that also was really not a fun game. You just get bullied by people playing like the best dinosaurs, and they all group up together and just beat the shit out of you like as a baby, because you have to start off as a baby and then grow up, and it's challenging to do that. It's very challenging to do that, but I did have fun with it, and it was fun to play with friends, as stupid of a game as it was. But similarly to Creatures of Scenaria, I just kind of got bored of it, because it really wasn't that good of a game. Yeah, no, I hear you. It's fun to be a creature. It's fun to be a creature of Scenaria. Where did I learn to draw machinery? I never learned how to draw machinery. Look at what, this is not machinery. This is nothing. This is just lines and circles and lines coming out of circles. Like, my approach to drawing machinery is like kind of just wing it. Like, I don't know if you're just joining now, but I was kind of explaining my process where I create a silhouette, like a general body plan for how I want the thing to look. And then I put in a couple of details, like where the arms would be, maybe some joints in the arms, what I want like the general head to look like. And then I go and I find reference. I find some real life inspiration, some fictional inspiration, and I kind of use that to fill in the gaps where I'm missing details. But yeah, I mean, like, this is as ad-libbed as you can get for machinery. Yeah, I think. I don't really enjoy spending a ton of time, really making it look super detailed and having like all of the different parts connect to one another. I'm not saying that's not cool. I think it is really cool when people do that. But I don't do that. I don't do that myself. One of my favorite things to draw, I do love drawing monsters. I don't love drawing robots. Kaijune is always a bit of a forced exercise for me for drawing robots and machinery in general, because I don't like it. Dragon's one of my favorites. Dinosaur's one of my favorites. I like drawing people. I like drawing big beards and female forms. I like drawing sort of feminine body shapes and stuff, boobs and butts. That's always fun. I like drawing muscles. I particularly like drawing hands, like tendons and grasping fingers and knuckles and wrists and forearms and stuff. I like drawing that. I like drawing crabs. I like drawing lobsters. I like drawing... that's it. Those are the only things I like drawing. If you look through like my repertoire of illustrations, I mean, some of these are commission works. But yeah, like big hand, big arm, female form, muscles, arms, that guy. It's not really any of the things I listed. I'll find a piece that I really was happy with. Dragons and female forms. That's why I like Shyvana so much. Dinosaurs. Yeah, that's basically that's the gist of it. Yeah, I really like drawing hands. I like drawing hands that are like kind of like fucked up, like weird skeletal, sinewy hands. But like I sometimes add hands to things that really have no like. I drew a horse and I still ended up giving it hands. Like I like drawing hands. I've definitely drawn creatures that are just hands and hands and more hands. One of my mermaids from a couple years ago had a lot of hands in mermaid. How long ago was this? Longer than that. But I had one creature that was like... Yeah, this one. This one's kind of just hands and hands and more hands. Alright, so now, like I said, I like these colors. What I'm going to do is, instead of cleaning up these lines, I'm just going to take technical pen, just a default brush in Procreate, and I'm just going to fill all this space. Going to put in. So now, something important to know. If you are making an illustration and you want that character, even if it's not, you're not doing like a background per se, but you want that character to be set against a color, anything other than just a white void. As soon as you start working with color, bring that backdrop, bring whatever color or colors you want behind it into your piece. So if you're working traditionally, tone your canvas, color your sketchbook page, work from a colored piece of paper. But you should always have your character. Let's say we're just doing a character illustration. If you're just doing a character illustration, that character you should consider how the colors around it impact the character itself. The colors of the character. So always consider that whenever you are using color. Don't color it on a white background and then, finish coloring it and then put color behind it. I used to do that, and every time I did it, I'd be like, oh, that doesn't look good. That's because while I was adding the colors, my eyes were adjusted for a white background. Color relativity is real. It's a real thing, and it's very important to consider how colors are going to interact with one another. Even if you don't think like, oh, well, it's just a background, it doesn't matter. It does matter. It very much does matter. Plan to start my own art-related channel to present my work, and I was wondering what mic I'm using. This is a Yeti microphone. It has a couple different settings. I am thinking about investing in a better microphone. These are not bad. They are definitely good enough. I've used this one for years. It's got this thing, this little screw base where it's compatible with like an arm like this. It didn't come with this arm. I had to buy this arm separately. Didn't come with this this pop filter either that I bought separately. Did come with this pop filter. It's all right. It's definitely very good. It's definitely very affordable. I'm looking into buying a better quality one. I also don't have a great studio for recording sound. The room that I'm in right now is where I record my audio for videos and stuff, so there's a lot of reverb. There's a lot of ambient noise and stuff. So that's a big factor to consider too. I mean, obviously, you don't have to have a studio for recording sound. I don't. But, you know, maybe I would have more subscribers if I did. I don't know that sound quality is like the deciding factor when it comes to a channel's success on YouTube. But if you really want to go all out, get some padding on your walls and stuff wherever you're recording. But again, there are a lot of software has sound correction, denoise, de-reverb, vocal enhancer. Now a lot of programs have like an AI that does it all for you. Reduces background noise, reduces reverb, reduces mic peaking and stuff like that, like audio peaking. But I use Yeti. They're definitely very reliable. Like I said, I've had this for years. But I will also say I have been thinking about getting a new microphone, maybe a little bit better quality. But not anytime soon, don't worry. I don't like talking about my microphone with this, but it's right here. Like, don't worry, you're great. I love you. And every time I do this, everyone watching the stream has to take their headphones out because it's making a very loud sound. So as you can see, like I said, I'm not doing lines, and finishing them and cleaning them up. I'm doing lines, and then I am adding color and light, without cleaning those lines up. And then what I'm gonna do is, once I sort of have, a general light source established, and you know, a clearer idea of what colors are mapped where. Then I'm going to merge the 2 layers down. Oh, excuse me. I gotta desync that from my iPad. Then I will merge the 2 layers down, and I'll work all on 1 layer. Welcome, welcome. If you're just joining, welcome to the stream. Glad to have you here. If you're just joining and you're wondering what it is that I'm working on, this is the Kaijune 2026 challenge. Designing a giant monster or robot every day for a month based off of a series of prompts that I created. I'm doing this alongside several other artists and a bunch of Subjectively fans. If you'd like to participate in the challenge, check out the link in the description to our Subjectively community page on Unveil. And you can also watch the video on our main channel, the most recent video, kind of explains the whole challenge and what I'm doing and how you can participate if you are interested. If you have any other questions or comments or constructive criticism, please let me know. I'm checking the chat as often as I can. Any prompt I'm particularly looking forward to? I gotta check the list, because I don't know them all off the top of my head. Let's see. No, I guess no. The answer is no right off the back. Right off the bat, rather. Oh, opulent. I always look forward to opulent. I've done that on my prompt list before. I think on for Smallest I did opulent as a prompt. Preserved sounds pretty fun too. So on my last Kaijune piece, the horse that I was working on, the big kaiju horse, I did the same method of like doing kind of a loose sketch, and instead of, finishing the line work before I went into colors, I did all the colors, with very loose lines. And I'm happy with how that came out. However, I think what I learned from that is before I like merge my lines, my sketch, my underdrawing, with the color layers, I want to make sure I have a little bit more figured out, a little bit more rendered, a little bit more actually understood. You want to be able to understand what you're illustrating, right? You need to, even if your audience doesn't understand, you need to have some understanding. And that makes it possible for you to actually create form and light and shape and stuff. It's hard to do that if you don't know it's hard to create a convincing sphere if you yourself as the artist don't know if you're creating a sphere or not. And so in a more specific sense, if you're designing like a robot like this, it's important to understand all of your shapes and how they interact, especially if you're taking my approach to illustrating machinery, which is kind of winging it, kind of ad-libbing it, which means a lot more nonsensical shapes that you have to kind of understand at some level in order to make it look convincing. And so that exploration can either happen in your sketching phase, which I would say I'm still in my sketching phase. I'm adding color to my sketching phase, but I'm definitely still sketching. But I want to like map out all my highlights and shadows and like little details and stuff. Those aren't as important. But if I know where my light is falling, which things are dark, which things are light, then when I go in and kind of add the finishing touches, I'll be able to do that more effectively without getting sort of lost in my own illustration. Is this Kaijune's lore connected to my 2022 one? I'm considering this kind of like a soft reboot. Excuse me, of the 2022 lore. Because I liked that story and that setting, but I didn't spend a lot of time really planning it out, so it feels a little incomplete. Not just like how I ended the story, but just in general, like the world, and all of the events in the story were kind of ad-libbed as I was illustrating, whereas this one I think is pretty similar in nature to my 2022 story, the World Eater story. Similar enough that I feel like the two stories could kind of be part of the same story, or rather, the 2022 is sort of a prototype that became this story. So it's not like, this is a continuation or a prologue or an epilogue to World Eater. It's more like the story that I had for World Eater has become this. I want to explore a lot of the same themes, a lot of the same real world issues, kind of similar settings. The idea of like industrializing kaiju defense. Oh yeah. You gotta add greeblies and doodads. Bits and bobs. This and that. Thingamajigs. Doohickeys. I'm sure there are some professional illustrators that could give you a much better breakdown on how to actually illustrate complex subject matter like machinery, and do it in a way that is a little bit more believable. But personally, for my purposes, specifically for this project, but in general, like for me, machinery is more of a metaphorical subject matter than a literal subject matter. I'm not an engineer. I find engineering interesting, but I don't really have any interest in trying to make something seem believable in terms of engineering design. So I would rather get a little weird with it. Add some doodads, some bebops and rock steadies. As it were. Do you have a favorite comic book or manga story? Favorite comic or manga creator? I'm gonna get kind of vanilla on you here. I really love Spider-Man. That's kind of my. If I had to pick a single comic book, Spider-Man is definitely my boy. So then well, I like Stan Lee. I like I like Steve Ditko. I wouldn't say they number among my favorite comic book creators. I'd say my favorite comic creator is Bill Watterson. of Calvin and Hobbes. I absolutely loved Calvin and Hobbes when I was a kid, and I still do to this day. Just very nostalgic, very sweet, very just a nice perspective on life and childhood and youth and innocence and happiness and basic joys and friendship and parenting. Yeah, I've always loved the way he illustrates. You can tell that he's like inspired by Charles Schulz and the Peanuts and Charlie Brown and stuff. But he also does. I always loved when he did those couple of issues. Those few strips that were like, rendered like 50s and 60s era romance or sci-fi or drama comics or superhero comics. He was a very strong, versatile illustrator. He is. He's not dead. I don't think he still makes illustrations anymore. I always think about Bill Watterson when I think about like the kind of legacy I want to have as an illustrator. Create something that is popular and that people really love, but that never becomes like this global, marketable phenomenon. Like, I always really respected that Watterson never sold the rights to Calvin and Hobbes to like a movie studio, because they wanted to make a Calvin and Hobbes movie, and like maybe a Calvin and Hobbes movie would be good, but it also might be terrible, and it's just not something that needs to be made into a movie. Not everything that has ever been written or conceived needs to become a movie. And I appreciate that Bill Watterson kind of stood by his creation as like, this is what I want it to be. I want it to be, a Sunday funny that people read in the newspaper, every morning, and just a fun little pick-me-up throughout the day, a little dose of daily childhood, and it doesn't need to be anything more than that. And that's kind of my goals, my what I envision, my ideal future is I create something that a lot of people love and that I'm really happy with, and that hopefully makes me enough money that I can support myself and my family, but that is not like bought by Disney and turned into this massive franchise that, in 30 years people are going to be like, oh, this is so trash now. Like, I would hate for my stories to become something like Star Wars, where it's like I'm not even involved in creating them anymore, and like there are people that just shit on it constantly and be like, oh, this is so terrible, it used to be like this and I liked this so much more. And like, I don't know how George Lucas feels about modern fans of Star Wars, but like most fandoms suck, and like most fandoms really just lose the intention of the actual artist who created what they claim to love so much, and instead just gripe about things that are irrelevant and petty and just stupid. And like, that really only happens when your creation gets popular enough that people will like it just to say that they like it, And now, to give you an example, like Spider-Man is an example of something that has become so popular that a lot of the people who claim to like Spider-Man don't really understand what the intention of the creators of Spider-Man were trying to do with it. And like, people who don't really like Spider-Man, who know very little about it, give it so much either praise or criticism that is just completely, they don't have any context for what it is that they're actually talking about. And that frustrates me as a fan of these things, but it would frustrate me so much more as a creator of these things. This weekend I went to see the Backrooms movie. And I love the general concept of the Backrooms, not just the original Kane Pixels film, the short, indie horror film, analog horror, but just the concept in general, and the original creepypasta and how it sort of branched out into all kinds of different games and stories. And I was cautiously optimistic going into it, because like with Calvin and Hobbes, I did not think that the Backrooms was something that would benefit from the format of a typical Hollywood feature-length film. The original short film, it's only like 6 minutes long, if that. Like, I feel like that was a perfect setting for it, because the Backrooms is a story that benefits from having less information. The more information you add to the Backrooms, the less interesting it is, because the whole concept is based on this fear of these uncanny spaces that represent so many different things to so many different people. And the more you specify and say this is that and this is that and this thing happens here and this thing doesn't, it takes away, in my opinion, from what I love about the Backroom. So I was afraid, the movie was going to be like, we're in the Backrooms and we have to figure out how to get out. But it wasn't. It did a really good job at creating horror through suspense and atmospheric tension. Did a really good job at kind of explaining just enough to keep the general audience engaged, but without giving so much information that it felt like, I'm the Backrooms researcher and I've discovered this, and that about the Backrooms. Like, I really didn't want to have like the expository character just drone on and on about, the creatures in the Backrooms and, the navigating the Backrooms and this is your Backrooms location device. Like, I didn't want any shit like that. And there wasn't. There wasn't anything like that. It's a really good movie, whether you like the Backrooms and that kind of like liminal horror in general, or if you just like horror movies, or if you're just curious about it. I definitely recommend it. It was very, very good. I want to watch it again, honestly. And I'm not a huge horror movie fan. I like horror games. I've talked about this before. I like horror games. I'm not usually a big horror movie fan. And it was scary. Like, I mean, because I'm not a big horror movie fan, I think my tolerance for scary things is a little bit lower than some people. But I thought it was pretty scary. I thought there were some scary visuals, some very tense moments. Some horror, I like... For me, the scariest horror is, like, actual, like, horrifying real-life situations. Not just, like, a monster that is trying to kill you in, a cave or in the Backrooms, but, like, abusive family members or, a psycho that holds you hostage or something like that. Like, that is really scary to me. And there was stuff like that, too. It's a lot. It's not super violent or anything like that. There's a little bit of violence, but not really. But it is disturbing. So if that's not your cup of tea, then do not watch it. But it's also not like, oh no, the entity has Joseph. We have to go after the entity and stop him. It's not like that. It's like, it's good. It's good, unique horror that I think is going to help popularize liminal horror, hopefully for the better. I don't know. I mean, the Backrooms as a concept was already kind of bastardized by, like, Roblox and, like, low-effort YouTubers that just kind of use it as, like, a fun buzzword to get people interested. So, like, that's pretty much already happened. I think this will actually increase the quality of content made surrounding that genre. Yeah, I mean, Kane Pixels is an interesting guy. I think young directors, in general, they can either have some really cool, unique ideas and are bold enough to try it, or they're just kind of like a little bit arrogant and are like, this is a good idea, and if you don't like it, you're stupid, and then they end up making something that sucks. I think King Pixels is kind of somewhere in between that. Like, he does really have good ideas. He's also 20 years old, and he's kind of still figuring stuff out, but he's being interviewed on TV, and his movie is becoming very popular, and I think that, that can make a young person get a bit of a swell head, and act a little bit more with some vibrato and gusto that's maybe not even representative of who he actually is. So it'll be interesting to see, because apparently he wants to make more. But he does really, I think he really understands this concept that he really helped popularize in the first place, and he does a really good job, in my opinion, of creating that in the medium, in the form of a feature-length movie. What's going on over there, Panko? You itchy? Making a lot of noise. And for me, the proof is in the pudding. That movie was very good. And, I would say that I'm also pretty discerning when it comes to that kind of that sort of subgenre of horror. I haven't really seen a lot of stuff, in terms of games or short films or movies that has done it well. And this movie, I would say, is one of the ones to have done it the best out of anything that I've watched. What is the movie with the guy ended up on where he jumps really high and there's green mantis people? Oh, someone already answered it. Yeah, I think you're talking about John Carter, where he goes to Mars. I believe that's a pretty old story too. I think that's from like the 30s, and they adapted it into a movie. Don't take my word on that. I don't know for sure, but I think that's an old story that was adapted into a movie like 10 or 15 years ago. I remember watching that with my very cynical, judgmental uncle. And, like, he's the kind of guy... He's an artist. He's an illustrator. He's a very talented illustrator, actually. And, he's so... He's so critical of almost everything. And, I have a hard time figuring out what his standards for what something good is. Because I thought that movie was kind of dumb, but he loved it. And I was like, okay. I think maybe now as an adult, because I watched it when I was a kid, maybe now as an adult I would be able to understand it more, like, because he really likes that era of, like, classical storytelling, like the advent of, like, action, drama, and sci-fi kind of intersecting for, comics and written stories. And maybe that movie really pays homage to that genre, that time period in fiction. I thought it was kind of stupid, though. But again, I watched it when I was younger, and my tastes were different back then, so who knows, maybe I would like it now. I don't really remember that much about it, to be honest. Excuse me. Alright, so now I've merged down my layers, and this is going to be what I call the finishing touches. We're going to go in and we're going to just clarify some shapes that maybe are a little ambiguous. We're going to better define some light sources. Sort of a general cleanup. I'm using the blunt pencil this time to have a little bit more opacity. You'll also see me using the auto shape tool to get some nice straight or perfectly curved lines. What part of my artistic process do I enjoy the most? I think actually this is the part that I like the most, sort of like the finishing touches. Going in and sort of taking all of the sort of unfinished rough ideas that I have assembled together to create an image and really cleaning them up. And I want to set myself up to enjoy that part even more. And I think this process that I've demonstrated to all of you today is a great way for me to do that, to really to sort of spend a little bit more time but a little less effort really working into a sketch so that I have all my information figured out, so that when I get to this point I can more easily focus on these little tiny details and moments in the illustration, without having to worry about how it's going to look overall. You know, in general, when you work digitally, it's important not to spend too much time super zoomed in. I guess that's also true for traditional illustration, but it's like it doesn't happen as much with traditional illustrators because you know you can't get that close when you're working traditionally, you know, unless you're Superman and your eyes are that good. But like, you know, normal people, you know, you get as close as your eyes can get to the canvas. And if you're working on a small canvas, that is limited even further. So, you know, when you work digitally, it can be tempting to zoom in a lot. And like some artists work that way and they can make it work. So if you can make it work, make it work. But before you can zoom in, before you can get into the nitty-gritty details, you really have to figure out, you know, the light, the shapes and the forms. Those are all very important. And you can't always do that just with line work. Sometimes you have to do it with color. And like again, like don't sweat like when I zoom into this, like I'm noticing like all these little things that look like kind of clean, like unfinished and blurry, but then when I zoom out, it's like, oh, I'm not looking at that at all. Like it's these little tiny details really aren't that important. And if they are important to you, then go for it. Like, you know, spend that time. But it's like it's going to be near impossible to do an illustration every day for a whole month if you spend that much time on the details. Now, if you like those details and you really want to spend time on that, you know, go for it. But you'll probably just do like a couple of illustrations for the month instead of, instead of doing one every day. But, there are so many different ways to draw and to illustrate. And you should never really limit yourself to one or the other. Try different things and figure out what works for you. To answer your question more specifically, I love painting fire. I love painting metal or reflective surfaces. I love painting jewels. But yeah, sort of that painting process that happens after lines, where you can sort of take the information that you've conveyed with your lines and give it dimension through color and light. And you can give dimension with just lines. It's a totally different process, and I would not say I'm very good at that. That requires a lot of practice. I mean, everything does. I had a teacher, an illustration professor in college, who loved detail. She taught a class called Observation to Concept, and the class was kind of all about learning how to use reference to inform your artwork. And I loved that class, actually. And I think I gained a lot from that professor. But her approach to illustration is so different than mine. And I remember her talking about the kinds of, about my work specifically. If you guys remember the freelancers, my characters, one of them is a crocodile. And I would really stylize the crocodile. And I would sort of stylize the rendering on his scales and stuff. And I remember her coming over to me while I was working on an illustration. She was like, why not spend more time with those scales? Why not really look at a photograph of a crocodile and really work into and study where all of the scales, the different types of scales, where on the body they fall, why they look different on different parts of the body. And I'm like, that is all very interesting to me, and I do like researching stuff about that, but I also like stylizing forms, so without adding all of the tiny little details. A big artistic inspiration of mine is J.C. Leyendecker. He's an illustrator from around the turn of the century, 1920s, 30s, and 40s, and even a little bit earlier, I think. And he was kind of a predecessor to Norman Rockwell. And he worked in a style that, from a distance, seemed very realistic. His handling of light and form was very convincing. But when you look closely at his illustrations, this from a distance, this looks very realistic. But when you zoom in, he simplifies form in very geometric ways. And shadow and highlights become these sort of blocks of color. These are very low resolution images. This is a higher resolution image. And there is a lot of very subtle shifts in color, and you can really see his brushstrokes, but there's not a ton of detail. Like, you can't see the fabric of this guy's shirt. You can't see the pores on his skin. It's all sort of simplified into blocks of shape and color. And now, granted, this guy really understands light. You know, he did a lot of very meticulous studies to understand this. I'm not saying that this is an alternative to learning how to, you know, clearly, like, he understands anatomy and all these different important things that an illustrator should know. But he takes what he knows and he stylizes it in very interesting ways, in a very distinct, unique way. You know, I mean, look at this here. Like, this, look how smudgy and imperfect that looks. You can really see, but when you zoom out, you get this strong highlight on the horse's neck, that kind of brings a focus of contrast to this point of tension here, where the rider is pulling on the reins. Here are some sketches, actually. These are some studies and sketches. He's also noted as, Happy Pride Month, by the way, he's noted as sort of an artist who depicted some sort of some versions of homoeroticism in his illustrations, sort of sexualizing men in a way that was pretty uncommon for the time. This piece is pointed to a lot as this sort of very handsome, young, strong man, you know, kind of with exposing himself a little bit. I love this illustration. This is one of my favorites because this is like a criticism of the values, you know, American values when it comes to traditional religions like Thanksgiving, where this pilgrim, you know, this preacher, this colonist is kind of scornfully, judgmentally looking at this football player, and it's sort of, you know, oh, our values have completely shifted. Thanksgiving was about Christianity and survival and you know, conquering this wild world, and now it's about football. You know, 1628 versus 1928. And of course, that conversation continues to this day. What is valuable about the holiday of Thanksgiving? Is it really something we should be celebrating at all? Is there value to the original values of Thanksgiving in the modern day? A little bit more eroticism there. Yeah, I just love this. The way he stylizes hair, too, kind of turns it into these, like, chunks of geometric shapes instead of individual strands of hair. I should never show really good illustrators on my streams, because then I go back to my work and I'm like, oh, God. But, you know, there are very few illustrators who can live up to the legacy of J.C. Leyendecker. I don't expect to be as skilled of an illustrator as J.C. Leyendecker at this point in my career, or maybe ever. But that's okay. It's always good to have someone to look up to have a goal to work towards. If I want to be as good of an illustrator as J.C. Leyendecker, I have to put a little bit more time into drawing things other than made-up robots. You know, you have to do a lot of life drawing, a lot of really boring figure studies and still lives to get to that level of illustration skill. And I don't do that as much as I should. Do I prefer to do extensive research before starting a piece, or just wing it and figure out as I go? It depends. For something like this, I don't do extensive research just because I have to be conscious of time. But I do think that the more time you spend researching a subject for illustration, the less time you might actually have to spend illustrating. Because again, sort of like what I was talking about, like figuring out little details and things like light and shape and form, all of these things, if you research beforehand, allow you to sort of save a lot of time in figuring it out while you are actually drawing. I've found that, it's like, it feels like it might be a waste of time to do research ahead of time, but doing that research can help you come up with better ideas. Because, if you have like a general concept and you're just sort of like, yeah, that's fun, I want to pursue that, versus like a general concept and you're like, let me look into that a little bit more and just find some images that inspire me, or read on some subject matter that is related to that idea, you might strengthen the idea, come up with some new ideas on top of that. I have been looking at the Unveil submissions. There are some awesome ones already. I've seen a lot of really great crab designs, which I am thrilled to see. When I wrote the prompt shell, I was really like, okay, Jack, are we going to start this with a giant crab? And I was really going to, but then I had the idea for the turtle with like the yokai oni mask, and I was like, I'll save the turtle for later. Or rather, I'll save the crab for later. I'll definitely do at least one crab before this month is over. That's what I'm saying. Gotta have some crabs. No, you know, I last time I did Kaijune, I did do a crab kaiju, but I don't think I did a crab mech. And it seems a little daunting, to be honest, because as opposed to a crab kaiju, a crab mech would mean a lot of extra mechanical drawing. You know, crab mech has quite a few limbs to it. So I'm not sure if I would be giving myself more work than I could handle. But I do think it would be cool. Definitely be cool. Alright, I see that someone just joined, and I'm sorry that unfortunately this is going to be the end of today's stream. I have to take my dog out and do a couple things around the house, but I'm not quite done with this yet. I got more done than I thought I would. I will probably finish this up off stream. But then tomorrow I'm going to stream again, and we can work on another kaiju and or mech. I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. What is tomorrow's, or not tomorrow's, what is day 5's prompt? Because this is day 4. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Day 5 is jointed. Oh, that could be a crab. That could be a crab. I'll think about that before tomorrow. But guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're working on your own kaiju illustrations, best of luck. Don't forget to post them to the Unveil. And if you are curious about this challenge, you want to find out more, make sure to check out our main channel and click the link in the description for the Unveil community page if you want to see what other people are working on. So thank you. Happy Kaijune, and I'll see you in the next stream. Bye.